the NRA. Their pro-gun policies have resulted in dead children, dead mothers, and dead fathers. I'm Pat Davis, and I approve this message.
It's incredibly painful.
Well, it hasn't been a big year for subtle political ads, and we're still just getting warmed up. Former George W. Bush ethics lawyer Richard Painter is running as a Democrat for the Senate in the state of Minnesota, and he just produced what some are calling a dumpster fire of an ad. Watch this.
Some people see a dumpster fire and do nothing but watch the spectacle. Some are too scared to face the danger, or they think it will benefit them if they just let it keep on burning. Others shrug and say, oh, all this talk of a dumpster fire, it's just fake news. There is an inferno raging in Washington. But here in the land of 10,000 lakes, we know how to put out a fire.
I am Richard Painter, and I approve of this message.
Richard Painter joins us tonight. Richard, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker.
Here you have this metaphor, Trump being a dumpster fire. You often hear liberals say that it's a dumpster fire. But you have a literal dumpster fire in your ad, and because you're running from a state with a lot of water, you put out the fire. How did you come up with that?
Well, the dumpster fire in Washington isn't just about Donald Trump, although he certainly contributed a lot to the dumpster fire. It's been steadily getting worse over the years, and a lot of it has to do with our system of campaign finance and the Supreme Court's refusal to allow Congress to regulate campaign finance. In the Citizens United case, the PAC money, the super PAC money, and the dark money organizations. And then you have K Street lobbyists, and on top of that, you've got financial conflicts of interest of not only the president.
So it's an inferno, as you said.
It's an inferno, absolutely.
It's an inferno. You said that in the ad, and you looked fiercely at the camera as you said that, and some of us were a little taken aback, impressed, a little in awe. What kind of reaction have you received to this ad?
Well, a lot of people share my concerns about what's going on in Washington. It is a dumpster fire. We need somebody to put it out. We need a constitutional amendment to repeal the Citizens United case so we can get campaign finance under control. We need to clear out conflicts of interest.
Well, I agree with you on that. Do you have any firefighting experience?
Well, I have some ethics firefighting experience. I spent 2.5 years in the Bush administration as a chief ethics lawyer. I saw a lot of what goes on in Washington, and it goes on in both parties. I want to emphasize this is not a liberal or conservative thing. This is a concern for all Americans. The corruption in Washington, the K Street lobbyists. You got members of the United States House and Senate own stocks in healthcare companies and energy companies while they're passing healthcare legislation. You got the president of the United States with the Trump organization. It goes on and on.
If you came to Washington and served in the Congress, and you were walking down a street on Capitol Hill and you saw a dumpster on fire, how would you respond to it?
Well, I think I'd call the fire department on that one.
Oh, come on now.
Absolutely.
Wait, you come to Washington, you see an actual dumpster fire, and you don't respond, and you call the firemen?
I think you got to get the fire department over there, because my expertise is dealing with the
That's your
dumpster
campaign
fire
promise?
in politics in Washington, the corruption in Washington, the corruption of our campaign finance system.
It sounds like you're, well, hold on, it sounds like you're promising to get elected and then have someone else deal with the problems. That's not much
you said if we're talking about the dumpster fire in Washington, D.C., Capitol Hill, and in the White House. We need financial conflict of interest legislation.
Richard. Right.
Absolutely. We need a lot more. We better get it done.
Richard Painter, went to the same high school. I appreciate that about you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Well, we've told you repeatedly over the last couple of weeks about how the FAA, which is in charge of your safety when you travel by air, has altered its merit-based hiring testing for air traffic controllers, adding a bogus biographical questionnaire to the process. The new test's existence is bad enough. They are seeking out the unqualified intentionally. But even more worrisome than that is the fact that the FAA apparently didn't care if people cheated on their already watered-down test. In 2016, the Department of Transportation found that the National Black Coalition of Federal Aviation Employees had given its members guidance on how to answer the biographical questionnaire so they could pass it. In other words, the group helped them cheat by giving them the correct answers ahead of time. Cheating on a federal hiring test is a crime, and it ought to be. And yet, despite that, nobody was ever charged. In fact, one union member connected to the cheating appears to be still employed by the FAA. Michael Pearson is a former air traffic controller. He's an attorney, and he's involved in litigation surrounding the FAA's hiring practices. He joins us tonight. Michael Pearson, thanks a lot for coming on. First, this is such a strong allegation that I want to get to how you know this to be absolutely true.
Well, I've been involved in this since it actually began when I first heard about it with the purging of the list. If folks were watching your show, they remember that you had thousands of people on the list that were qualified, including military experience and aviation experience. It all of a sudden was purged, in the FAA's words, and then folks were forced to go through this biographical questionnaire, which was designed by an outside vendor. And so for the last several years, including litigation that my firm, along with Mountain States Legal Foundation, brought, we've been able to dig up information through the Freedom of Information Act process as well as the litigation process. So not only do we have internal people tell us this was going on, that they were afraid that if they would come forward, the FAA would penalize them, the DOT would penalize them at fairly high levels of the government. But now we have actual documentary evidence that substantiates our worst fears.
So the union helped people cheat on the test, again, just to put this in context, to become air traffic controllers and control commercial aviation. Millions use it every year. People could die as a result of this. And yet no one was ever charged for that? Why?
Well, it wasn't the union. It wasn't the Air Traffic Controllers Union. It was the NBCFAA. It's a employee group. The National Black Coalition of Federal Aviation Employees certainly did that. And it was a process started from early to 2012, 2013. There was a group within that organization who determined that the makeup of the workforce was too white. They wanted to get a more diverse workforce. They started lobbying through the political process, which is certainly allowed to. However, they then crafted this BQ exam, which it's not a screening test. It actually turned out that the scoring rubric for that actually penalized people with aviation experience, yes, pilots, air traffic controllers. And then to make it worse, they had folks stand in line for this test that someone in the NBCFAA had apparently gotten the answers to and coached other people how to pass the test. So not only were our best and brightest, as the FAA says, actually purged off the list, they then were forced through a screening process that discriminated against them intentionally on the scoring of the test. So most, if not the great majority of them, failed that exam, while people were given the answers and how to pass the test. Even more important, recent documents show that when this individual was interviewed, he gave a written statement saying that he didn't do that. Then he went into a verbal interview with a DOT OIG criminal investigator, said he didn't do it. He had his attorney with him. Incredibly, the DOT OIG investigator allowed him to see witness statements contradicting that, and then allowed him to go out of the room with his attorney, come back in and change his story. That's just not done. Anybody in law enforcement or the law, from the legal side, from an attorney side, or criminal investigation side, knows that that's beyond unusual. That's crafting an investigation to meet a predetermined outcome, i.e. nothing went wrong. This investigation was started due to people like Frank Lobiando, Randy Holgren, members of Congress on both sides of the aisle that were concerned about this process. And the DOT OIG investigator's final result are basically his suggestion or his recommendation was that this not be forwarded to the Department of Justice for a criminal investigation. This thing started at the high level of the DOT. It's a cover-up at the very highest level, and you have all people involved from both the DOT and FAA. And ironically enough, the architects, the implementers, and the facilitators are still employed at high levels within the FAA.
they should, and I never say this, but these are people who should be in prison because they're imperiling public safety on a mass scale.
At the very least, Tucker, what should happen is the DOJ, along with the FBI, should investigate what really went on and what really occurred. And then the process and due process of law should be followed. And the folks in the FAA at the highest management levels that designed this, the architects, implementers, and certainly the facilitators, should be brought to justice. As you say, it's both civilly and criminally illegal to do what happened here.
The air traffic control system in a country, you're basically third world at that point. I mean, if you can't maintain high standards of air traffic control, then it's over. Michael Pearson, thank you for that.